Hello everyone, Darkaball Trades here. Now I have too many projects that I start and never finish. Thanks ADHD. It is a wonder I've lasted this long on the YouTubes. Last week, I started a video by a channel called Redeem Zoomer titled All Atheist Arguments Answered in 10 Minutes. His title card shows that there are actually 40 arguments, which, again, fun fact, is not all atheist arguments. I have received some excellent feedback from you, my humble and no doubt of above average intelligence and attractiveness subscribers. So this week, I'm going to finish my food before I get on to dessert, which may be ice cream. I haven't decided yet. Yes, I even eat ice cream in the winter. Ice cream is good all year. We got 13 inches of snow where I lived last weekend, and still, I'll take a bowl of ice cream, or frozen yogurt, or gelato, or sorbet. Anyway, if your favorite argument didn't get answered, or a response for 16 out of the 18 of them, in the last video, let me know your favorite argument and if he responds to it, as well as what you think of his response. But before I get distracted even more, here is part 2 of grading our Zoomer's answers.
God is just used to fill in the gaps of things that science can't explain yet. Well, actually, God is the reason for everything, even things that science can explain. It's not one or the other. It's not like everything's explained by either science or God, and the more science can explain, the less God can explain. Really, science can explain almost everything, but God is still behind it all, because science explains the how, and God explains the why.
Oh, wow, no. This is an unfounded and unknowable assertion at best. As I stated earlier, before you can attribute a cause to explain anything, how or why, you need to show that it actually exists. Since you've already conceded that God does not exist in the physical world, it has no impact on the physical world, therefore cannot be the why for anything in the physical world either. What is happening here is that Zoomer is trying to explain a reason for something happening rather than accepting that we understand how things work. Why does there need to be a why when we have a perfectly good explanation otherwise? This is basically attempting to question the fundamental forces. They are fundamental. I know some people don't like brute facts, but even if we pretend that there is a why behind what would be considered a brute fact, the cause needs to be shown and justified, not just asserted. Again, you can't just define a god into existence. 2 for 19.
If God is good, why can't he destroy all evil? Well, he eventually will.
So God will take away free will? Isn't evil tied to man's free will? Or is it that we will no longer need to have growth in character formation, redemption, and reconciliation? There are a lot of problems to this response, but basically we will no longer be human in every outcome. This is nothing but a wait and see. But of course, how many people have done that only to die before all evil is destroyed? It isn't an answer. 2 for 20. Halfway done?
Why can't he do it now? Because he'd have to destroy you.
Why? Are you judging me as evil? How do you know I'm evil unless you're presuming to know the mind of God? Isn't everything part of God's plan anyway? I'm just a cog in the machine, and I am ready to be destroyed by your God to allow others to no longer have to suffer the immense pain they deal with every day. But that won't happen. As we've already established, your God is outside the material world, so your God can't destroy me. Not an answer. 2 for 21.
Why does God let any bad things happen? Because we deserve it.
Says who? After all evil is destroyed, will we no longer deserve it? What changed from the moment before to the moment after God destroys all evil that changes whether we deserve the bad things or not? This is arguably the worst response to the problem of evil I have ever heard. I tried to keep these answers short because I did a whole video on the problem of evil, so check that out if you want more on it. Though technically an answer, albeit a really bad one with so many holes, but an answer, I'll give them the point for this. 3 out of 22.
Well, animals don't sin, so why do they suffer? Well, the Bible says all things will be restored, so if God is good, we can assume that they will be compensated.
That doesn't explain why animals suffer. That's just saying that they suffer because they'll get compensated later. How lazy of an answer can you get? If a guy hits you with a baseball bat and then goes to jail and has to pay you a bunch of money, does that explain why he hit you with a baseball bat? No. 3 out of 23.
How do you know that God isn't evil instead? Well, because evil is not a thing the way good is. Just like cold is just a lack of heat, and dark is just a lack of light.
I am not. I'm a whole person, albeit a cartoon person, but a person nonetheless.
Evil is just a lack of good.
From defining things into existence to trying to define things out of existence. On the other side, why is good the actual thing and evil is the lack of it? Couldn't evil be the actual thing and good be the lack of evil? There is no justification as to why good is the actual thing and not the other way around. While the idea of evil as a privation of good might offer an explanation for moral evil, actions committed by moral agents, it may face challenges in explaining natural evil, suffering caused by natural disasters, diseases, and other non-moral factors. Natural evils don't seem to be mere absences of good, but involve real and tangible harm. His response seems to align with the notion that evil is a consequence of the misuse or absence of free will. However, this perspective assumes that all instances of evil are the result of free choices. Some philosophical discussions question whether this can fully account for all forms of evil, especially those that seem unrelated to human agency. Certain actions or states of affairs are not simply the absence of good, but could represent positive instances of evil. For example, intentional acts of cruelty, harm, or malevolence might be considered positive manifestations of evil rather than just the absence of good. His response presupposes an objective standard of goodness against which evil is measured. If there is an objective standard of goodness, it raises the questions about the nature of this standard and how it relates to the concept of God. We can question whether an existence of evil poses challenges to the notion of an all-powerful and all-good deity. Trying to define things into or out of existence is not the answer.
And for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible.
Why does it need to come from God? Why can't it come from another source? This brings the Euthyphro and the extended Euthyphro. I'm not going into that. I've covered subjective versus objective morality already. Again, though, I can switch it around and say that for there to be an objective evil, it needs to come from God. Therefore, there must be an evil God. You haven't justified why good is the actual thing and evil is the lack of it. 3 out of 24.
Can God make a rock he can't lift? Well, you're just asking if God can contradict himself, like can God lie, or can God change, or can God make another God?
I don't particularly care for this argument, but it has its merits, though we know God can lie as he does several times in the Bible. Let's see where he goes with this.
And the answer to all those things is no. God being all-powerful means he can do anything to things outside himself. It doesn't mean that he can do anything to himself or that he can contradict himself.
Why not? What is he bound by? God is portrayed as regretting what he had done, so clearly he can do things that cause emotional distress to himself, so he can do something to affect himself. So while this explanation is full of logical holes, he did technically answer the questions with an acceptable answer. I'm not sure I agree, but let's give him the point. 4 out of 25.
Why did God let evil exist at all? So he could be glorified in defeating it. Triumph over evil is a greater good than evil having just never existed.
God is a narcissistic showboat. Why does he need to be glorified at all? If he needs attention, then he definitely isn't perfect. And how much effort would it take to defeat evil? He wouldn't even have to think about it. So what is the glory for exactly? Plus, didn't he make evil? We should glorify a being for creating unimaginable horror and then defeating it without a thought? Why should anyone glorify a monster like that? He doesn't get praise for cleaning up his mess. Technically an answer, if profoundly bad. 5 for 26.
Religion is just wishful thinking. Well, if that were true, then the Bible wouldn't be all about how much we all suck.
What a blatant assertion. Though the initial argument is terribly formed, the word just gives a huge loophole for the theist to put his camel through. Humans fantasize about things including how they will be rewarded in the afterlife and how their enemies will be defeated forever. It's no surprise that a book would have those kinds of things in it. Instead, the Bible is more about how much God sucks. So, make the connection between the argument and the response, because there's a big leap in logic here. 5 for 27.
Psychology explains why you believe in God. So what? If God is real, we should expect there to be some psychological or social benefit to believing in him.
That if is doing a lot of heavy lifting for this one. Unfortunately for the response, if God is not real, those psychological benefits are the same. The comfort, sense of purpose, community support, and coping mechanisms that people derive from their religious beliefs can indeed contribute positively to their psychological well-being. The psychological benefits of belief don't necessarily validate the truth claims of religious doctrines. They reflect the meaningful impact that subjective experiences and communal practices can have on an individual's mental and emotional state. This distinction allows us to acknowledge the positive aspects of religious beliefs while engaging in critical discussions about objective reality of the divine. The answer didn't show the actual connection, but did address enough for a point. 6 for 28.
Spiritual experiences can be explained by brain chemicals. Well, romantic experiences can also be explained by brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean your wife isn't real. So spiritual experiences being explained by brain chemicals doesn't mean that God isn't real.
This is basically an analogy between spiritual experiences and romantic ones. I can get behind this to a degree, as just as the brain's involvement in romantic feelings doesn't negate the reality of one's partner, the brain's role in spiritual experiences doesn't negate the existence of a transcendent reality. While the analogy serves its purpose, it has limitations. Spiritual experiences often involve claims about supernatural or transcendent entities, which may not have a parallel in romantic experiences. Additionally, the analogy does not address the specific arguments or evidence provided by the atheist regarding the brain's role in a spiritual experience. Additionally, we have experiences with the existence of wives as objective facts. Wives exist. I've met other people's wives, and anyone would be hard-pressed to assert that they don't exist. The supernatural or transcendent entities have not been shown to exist. That is the point of the original argument, and simply because one has romantic feelings about a wife they believe exists, that doesn't mean that wife exists in reality either. So, the explanation seems to be dodging the point of the question, but it is technically an answer, so sure. 7 for 29.
Well, drug trips show that spiritual experiences are from the brain. Well, people who have had both drug trips and near-death experiences say that they're completely different categories of feeling.
Yeah, and? Things that affect different parts of the brain are different? You don't say. I can say that pain and pleasure are very different things for most people. That doesn't mean that they aren't entirely from the brain. The argument is not saying that simply because things are from the brain means that they're the same thing or experience. The question didn't even get close to answered. 7 for 30.
The story of Jesus was copied from the story of Horus or some other ancient character. Okay, dude, that's a Reddit atheist-level myth. Even atheist scholars know that that's silly.
Though this was simply dismissed rather than addressed, I don't necessarily disagree. Even if I were to say that there were similarities in the story of Mr. Jesus and previous dying and rising gods, the argument as stated did not provide any backing evidence, and I don't think there is sufficient evidence to posit that the argument is true or likely true. So, bad argument, not a great response, but acceptable due to Hitchens' razor. 8 for 31.
Faith is the opposite of logic and reason. No, it's not. Faith just means trust. Anytime you eat food, you're having faith that it's not poisoned, even if you can't scientifically prove it. If you're married, you have faith that your wife loves you, even if you can't scientifically prove that. And if you tried to scientifically prove it, she'd probably get very mad at you because it would mean you didn't trust her.
Beware the equivocation fallacy. Faith can mean trust, but to say it just means trust is not correct, especially when it comes to religious contexts. I don't have faith that when I sit down, the chair will not collapse. But if you want to define it as faith, then try to make it the same as your faith in a higher power. We're not talking about the same thing. My trust that the chair is not going to break is based on mountains of evidence that I and many others have done and could do again. I can investigate the chair and gain a level of trust. I can feel the chair physically, demonstrating that it is there to myself, and then I could show others the chair and demonstrate that it is there. I can have others test the durability of the chair. We have no such evidence for anything supernatural, let alone a god. So your answer is just plain wrong, as faith is not just trust in a religious context. I wanted to give a point for this, but it is just too fallacious. 8 for 32.
Evolution proves God didn't create the world. Well, not necessarily. God often works through natural processes in the Bible, and for all of church history, there have been prominent Christian theologians who have had a more metaphorical interpretation of Genesis, even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed.
Yep, like I said previously, when reality contradicts something in the Bible, you can change that part from literal to metaphorical in the Bible to try to keep believing. Though there are theistic evolutionists, so I don't have a huge problem with this answer. Evolution causes a huge problem for literalists, though. 9 for 33.
Christianity only spread because of military conquest. Well, eventually they did do military conquest, but for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was illegal, and it took over the Roman Empire despite that because of how popular it became.
I don't really have a problem with this answer, though it is hard to deny that military conquest did help spread it quite a bit. That, and over the course of the 4th century, especially under Emperor Theodosius I, Christianity transitioned from being one of many tolerated religions to the official state religion of the Roman Empire. The process culminated in 380 CE with the Edict of Thessalonica, also known as the Cunctos Populos Edict, issued by Theodosius I, Gratian, and Valentinian II. This edict declared Christianity, specifically Nicene Christianity, to be the state religion of the Roman Empire and required all Roman subjects to profess the faith. The Edict of Thessalonica stated, It is our will that all the various nations which are subject to clemency and moderation should continue to profess that religion which was delivered to the Romans by the divine apostle Peter, as it has been preserved by the faithful tradition, and which is now professed by the Pontiff Damasus and by Peter, Bishop of Alexandria, a man of apostolic holiness. This marked a significant shift, and from this point onward, non-Christian practices were increasingly discouraged, and non-Christian religions faced restrictions. Pagan rituals were prohibited, and non-Christian religious buildings were sometimes confiscated or destroyed. So, during the first 300 years, there may have been less spread by military conquest. This also ignores the other kinds of persecution and for what happened after the first 300 years. This may be the fault of the argument made. It was too narrow. So technically this is an acceptable answer. 10 for 34.
Constantine invented what we now know of as Christianity. Again, Reddit atheist level myth. Atheists can do better than that. Listen to an actual scholar.
While Constantine's influence on the Christian church was substantial, it would be an oversimplification to attribute the entire development of modern Christianity to him. The early centuries of Christianity involved complex theological debates, the formation of the biblical canon, and the establishment of ecclesiastical structures. These processes occurred over centuries and involved contributions from various Christian communities, theologians, and leaders. He is technically correct here, but again, a terrible argument. 11 for 35.
If Christianity is true, why are there so many denominations of it?
Finally! Something I can sink my teeth into! This is so close to the argument from Inconsistent Revelation. Another one of my favorites. This is basically saying that if a divine source provides revelation or guidance to humanity, there should be a consistent and uniform understanding of that revelation among believers. I'm excited for this. Let's see how he responds.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of denominations, but the things they agree on are a lot more significant than the things they disagree on.
That's it? That's all you have for one of the biggest problems? Yeah, they disagree, but they agree on core ideas? The disagreements are less important? That is the answer to the problem of how so many people get so many interpretations from the Bible, so much so that it causes major problems, including wars. I don't care if the things that they agree on are more significant than what they don't. These differences are causing major issues. They also disagree on what is required for salvation. I think getting that right would be pretty freaking important, right? So different denominations can't be correct if they hold different views. Do I need to be baptized? Do I need to do works? Do I need to cut off parts of my skin? Do I need to continuously accept your Mr. Jesus as my Savior, or is the fact that I did for a long time good enough? Once saved, always saved, right? You would think after watching all of these videos, I'd stop getting my hopes up. I really hadn't watched his response before writing that last part. A mega disappointment. 11 for 36.
There's no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible. Well, that's not true. There's the ancient Jewish historian Josephus who wrote about Jesus, and he's one of the reasons why even secular scholars know Jesus historically existed.
Another grossly oversimplified argument. This video could technically be considered evidence for Mr. Jesus outside of the Bible. What the argument should say is that there are no contemporaneous accounts for Mr. Jesus outside of the Bible. That passage from Josephus is widely considered a forgery anyway. There are others, but most of them just refer to this idea that people believed in some guy named Mr. Jesus, not actual accounts of his life. Weird, huh? Technically an acceptable answer though, 12 for 37.
You really think God made billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each of them just to have a personal relationship with you? Yes.
Again, that is on the questioner. The question asked if Zoomer really thinks that, and so a simple yes or no answer is acceptable. So 13 for 38. And that's it for his video? Wait a minute. I thought this was supposed to be 40 arguments. Did I miss one? Or two? Comment the argument and time if I missed one. That aside, rather than a review, I'm just going to point out that he actually only answered 13 questions. The rest were either dodges or blatantly incorrect information. I let more slide than I probably should, but really, he didn't even give an answer to a third of the arguments given. Responses are not answers. If you ask me, "Hey Professor Dark, what do you like about teaching?" and I respond with, "Look how cute my dog is," that is technically a response. It is not, however, an answer to the question. That's it for this one. So what did you think? Do you think Redeemed Zoomer made some good points and thoroughly took apart the atheistic worldview, whatever that means? Or do you think he burned those straw men to a crisp? Let me know in the comments below. This was a long one, So if you really like that I was able to respond to all the arguments made here, hit that like button to show your support. For more hard but fair responses, hit subscribe and keep up with the latest non-answers theists give. Though the real light among the dark, get it, are my patrons, Calamitous Anima, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Jammin' Bomb, Kai Henningsen, Tarek Alkasab, Triple Towel, and now welcome to Ooga Booga Luga. You are all my guides to better YouTube content. Thank you so much. If you'd like to be the encouragement for the me to cut through the lack of rationality, you can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. As this channel grows, my goals continue to grow with them. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And as always, keep learning.